Hi, so we're going to create 3 VMs using the VMSS, that's the virtual machine skill set, with a load balancer on the Azure platform, that's the Azure portal. So the virtual machine skill set creates and manages a group of identical load balanced VMs. What this means is it creates a certain number of virtual machines and it manages them at the same time. So it makes it easy for you to deploy virtual machines all at once and also be able to configure them simultaneously. So the number of VM instances can be manually or automatically increased or decreased based on the traffic demands or schedule. A minimum of 2 virtual machines is recommended for the VMSS, that's the virtual machine skill set, to ensure high availability. VMs in a skill set can be deployed in single or multiple availability zones. So in our previous videos, we were able to deploy the availability set in a single availability zone, but this time we're going to do that in multiple availability zones. There are 2 terms we need to understand. That's the horizontal scaling, which is the process of adding or removing virtual machines in a skill set. So for example, when you add more virtual machines to a skill set, you are horizontally scaling. A vertical scaling, on the other hand, is the process of adding resources to an existing virtual machine. For example, increasing the size of the VM. So we can see the difference between the horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. We also have these terms, scaling in and scaling out. So scaling in is to remove virtual machine instances from the skill set, while scaling out is adding virtual machines to the skill set. So let's go now to the lab and see what our configuration would look like. So now we're back on our lab and we can see the public load balancer will be connected to 3 web servers, server 1, 2, and 3, and the public load balancer would be publicly facing the internet. So it will have an IP address which would communicate with the internet, and the web servers would also be able to communicate to the internet through the public load balancer. So what it means that when we create the public load balancer and we need to configure it, we need to set outbound rules to enable the virtual machines to be able to access the internet through the load balancer. Also, the virtual machines are going to be automatically created by the cloud init script which we're going to use, and that's one of the benefits of the VMSS, is that it creates virtual machines all at once instead of doing that individually. And you can also configure them on deployment using the cloud init script. So we're going to do all that, and we'll make sure that the virtual machines are also located in different availability zones, as we can see here, availability zone 1, 2, and 3. And they will all be contained in the same virtual network. So let's go to our Azure portal and see how we can do that. So we're back on our Azure portal, and the first thing we need to do is to create our load balancer. So we'll click on load balancer, and then we'll create. So we'll leave our subscription the same. The resource group, we have to create a new resource group, and we'll call that RG Lab 05. Okay, and we need to give the name of our load balancer. So we'll say LB for load balancer Lab 05. And the region, we leave it as West Europe. This is okay. Scroll down and we come to, and we need to give this a public IP address name, and we'll put it down here, and we'll just add PIP, which is public IP, and we need to specify the availability zones, and this time we'll select zone redundant, because we're going to be dealing with virtual machines in different availability zones. So we'll leave it as zone redundant, and we'll continue. Click on tags, and we need to set the cost center. The value will be lab 05, and review and create, and create. And now we can see go to resource is being completely created. So click go to resource, and we'll click on the front end IP configuration. So this is the IP address that our virtual machines are going to be using to have access to the internet. So let's set our backend pools, which would include the virtual machines. So click add, and the backend pool name, we'll just call it backend pool. That's BEP for backend pool, and lab 05. And our virtual network, we need to create the virtual network because currently we do not have a virtual network. So let's do that. So we'll go down to virtual networks, and we'll create, and we're going to use the same resource group and call the name of the virtual network VNet lab 05, the same West Europe IP address. So we'll leave this, and the default for the subnet is okay. So security, fine, tags, and review and create. So create, and now our virtual network has been created. So we'll go back to our load balancer, and we'll select the one we've created, and go back to backend pool. I will add the backend pool, and we'll type again BEP for backend pool lab 05. And now our virtual network will select the virtual network we just created, and we'll scroll down and add. And now we've been able to create the backend pools. So the health probes, the next, we'll add that, and we'll just type in HP for health probe lab 05, and every other thing is okay. We'll click add, and then we'll go to load balancing rule. So we'll add a load balancing rule, and we'll just call this load balancing rule LBR lab 05, and our front end IP address will be that of the load balancer. The port is HTTP port 80, backend port HTTP port 80. Backend pool would be our backend pool. Health probe be the one we created, and we would select recommend, that this use outbound rules to provide backend pool members access to the internet. So we're going to create an outbound rule to permit the backend pool members to access the internet. So add, and now we've created our load balancing rule, and we need to create the outbound rule now to permit the virtual machines to have access to the internet. So add, and we'll call this outbound rule OBR lab 05, and the front end will be the same for the load balancer, all protocols fine, and the back end pool is the one which we created. Manually choose number of outbound points is fine. Select how to choose ports per instance, and here we just type in 800 is fine. So add that, and our outbound rule has been created. So our load balancer has been taken care of and is ready to have access to our virtual machines. So let's go and create the virtual machines, but this time instead of creating them individually, we're going to use the VMSS, that's the virtual machine skill set. So come up here and search for virtual machine skill set. So just type in skill set, and we can see virtual machine skill sets. Click on it, and now we need to create the skill sets. So click create, and we'll use the same resource group, RG Lab 05. Then virtual machine skill set name, we'll call that VMSS Lab 05. Region West Europe 2. Availability zone, we'll choose all the availability zones, the 3 of them, because we want our 3 virtual machines to be deployed evenly in these 3 availability zones. Scroll down, server is fine, the size is okay. We choose the password for the access to the virtual machines, and next, disk, fine, next, networking, and we're going to put the virtual machine in the same network with the load balancer as a virtual network. And we'll also come down here. This is the network card, so we need to ensure that we are permitting HTTP as the inbound rule. So we'll do that here. So we'll scroll down and we can see allow selected ports, and we'll permit HTTP. That we're going to deploy Apache on the virtual machines. So that is set. We need to keep the public IP address disabled. We do not need a dedicated public IP address for our virtual machines. They will use that of the load balancer. So once we're done, we'll click OK, and that is set. Then we'll next scaling. So we want on the initial instance, let 3 virtual machines be deployed. So we'll choose 3. Next, management, and here we'll just choose enable custom storage account, because we would like to use the console connection to the virtual machine instead of SSH. So we'll just leave that. And here is the diagnostic storage account that will be created for it. So we'll click next, health, and next, advanced. And here we're going to put in the cloud init configuration command, and I have it somewhere here, and I'm going to explain it once I paste it. So I'll copy that and I'll come here and paste it. So let me scroll up, and it's declaring the cloud configuration, and let me just read it first. It says pass a cloud init script, which is what we've just done here, or configuration file or any other data into the virtual machine while it is being provisioned. That's while it's being created. So this would make changes while the virtual machine is being created. So we first declare the cloud configuration package upgrade, because we want to upgrade the operating system to accommodate the Apache file Apache software that we're going to install. And here we have packages, which is the Apache web server that we want to install into the virtual machine. Then we'll write the files, and here we'll have permissions to do that, and we create the path where the index file we know would be. That's the Apache file. So if you scroll down, then in the HTML file, that's index.html, we'll put this text which says VMSS is currently deployed on this virtual machine. So this will be put in the 3 virtual machines, and then we'll run the web server to start. So that's the cloud init script. So once we are done with that, we'll just go to tags, and then we would put the cost center lab 05, and we review and create, and then we'll create. We'll give it some time to deploy. And now these virtual machines have been created, so we'll go to resource, and the instances is what we would like to see. So these are the 3 virtual machines that have been created, and currently they are updating. So we'll just refresh, and now we have the two virtual machines succeeded. The third one updating, so we'll just give it some time to update. And now we've refreshed, we can see that they're all running. So we want to first of all go to the networking, and we can confirm that we set our HTTP inbound rule, and we can see it says allow. And then we can go back to the instance, and let's look at the virtual machine, the first one, and go to networking, and we can see the HTTP inbound request is also applied. So we're going to use the IP address, which is that of the load balancer, for accessing the virtual machines. So we need to go back to overview, and now we can see the IP address for the load balancer, that is 16.186. We'll copy that, and let's just confirm that to the load balancer, and we can see it's the same thing, 16.186. So we'll come here, open this in a new browser, and we'll just apply that in. And now we can see it gives us VMSS is currently deployed on this virtual machine, just as we put it in. But if we refresh, we'll still see the same message. But how do we now confirm that the message is coming from either of the three virtual machines we've created? So what we're going to do is that we're going to change the content in the three virtual machines, and we're going to come back to reload the page to see the exact virtual machine that the service is using. So we'll go back to Azure, to the skill set. So click virtual machine skill set, the one we created. We go back to instance, and we can see the three of them. So we go to the first virtual machine in the skill set, and now we can quickly go to the serial console, which is more like a console link to the virtual machine that gives us the opportunity to access the command line of the virtual machine without using the Bastion. So let's just click on that serial console and type enter, and it says login. We put our login details, Azure admin, and the password, enter. And now we have access to the first virtual machine. We need to connect as the root user, so sudo su. So we are connected as the root. So let's see the path working directory, and there is nothing there. It says what, the home. So we're going to connect to the HTML file. So we'll just say cd, then we'll go into the var folder, www, and then we'll go into the HTML folder. And now we are there. We'll list what we have there, and we have index.html. So we're going to see what's inside the index.html, and we can see it gives us exactly what we saw in the browser. So we're going to change this to 001, so it will be specific on the virtual machine. So we'll nano into that index.html, press enter, and now we're in here, and we'll scroll down to the end, and we'll call this 001. So VMSS is currently deployed on this virtual machine 001. So we'll exit, Control X, and we'll say yes, we want to save, and enter. So now we've saved that, and let's confirm that. So we'll cut into the index.html file, and now we can see that we've included 001. So let's do that for the other two virtual machines. So we'll go back to VMSS, and we'll select the next one, and we'll go to serial console, and we'll say OK, and we'll log in, password. Now we're logged in, we're going to run the command as the administrator, which is sudo command to be the super user su. And now we're logged in as the admin. So we're going to go into the var folder to get to the HTML folder. So cd, the same thing, var www html. And now we are in, let's list the file there, index. So let's now change the content in the file. So nano index.html, and now we need to change that to 002. So this is the second virtual machine, so 002. So once we've done that, we'll exit, Ctrl X, and we'll say Y yes and enter. So we've done that, and let's go to the third virtual machine. So go back to our VMSS, to the third one, and we'll go to serial console, and we'll press enter, and let's log in, and our password, and now let's enter as the sudo super user. Now we have the admin. Let's go to the file, and now let's change the content of the file. And this one will make it the third virtual machine, so we'll make it 003. So let's exit, yes, and enter, and we're done with making the changes. So now we have labeled this as the virtual machine 1, 2, and 3. So let's go back to the browser with the IP address, and let's refresh. And now we can see it's using the first server. This is the first virtual machine, and we're going to copy this, open on another window, and let's refresh. And now we can see it has changed to virtual machine 003. So let's just copy this once again, and let's use another browser, and we paste that in and enter, and see we're back to the virtual machine 001. And if we refresh, we're back again to virtual machine 003. So I'm going to stop the virtual machine 003, and let's see the virtual machine it will choose. So I'll go back to the Azure portal, and I'm going to select the virtual machine, and now I'm going to stop it. Yes, and let me come back to confirm that it's been stopped. Instances, and refresh. So it's currently deallocating, stopping it. Refresh again, and now we can see that the third virtual machine is stopped. So let's go back to the browser we opened, and let's refresh and see what this one will change to. So we refresh, and now we can see it's using the second virtual machine. So we're going to stop this virtual machine and see if it will choose the first one. So this is the second one. We'll just select it and stop it and say yes, and refresh. It's currently deallocating, and refresh, and now we can see that the virtual machine is stopped. So let's go back to the browser we opened, and let's refresh again, and now we can see that it has selected virtual machine 001. So we've been able to deploy the virtual machines using the virtual machine skill set, and we've successfully been able to connect it to a load balancer, and we've been able to test it with the websites that we created.